Hello, we're back at another chamber chat, and I'm very excited today. We're at the Biotechnology Center in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. I'm Dr. Vail Garvin, President and CEO of the Central Bucks Chamber of Commerce, and we are on the street. Let me introduce to you Dr. Timothy Block, President and CEO of the BioTech Center, and Lou Kassa, who's the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer here. Dr. Block, we are here today because I understand you and a number of the businesses within the Biotech Center are working on prevention, testing, possible work toward a vaccine with COVID-19. Can you fill us in on maybe the 30,000-foot view, and then maybe Mr. Kassa can fill us in on some of the details?
Thank you, and thank you very much for hosting this series, which keeps us all informed in the area of what's going on. So you're right, we are doing some work related to the pandemic, but what I want to start with is to tell you a little bit about who we are and how Lou and I can divide up the responsibility of telling you what we're doing. So you're right, you are on the street, actually inside the Pennsylvania BioTech Center, which is an organization that has about 35 small startup companies, largely that come from academics and scientists from the pharmaceutical industry with ideas, spin out those ideas into small companies. So that's the PA BioTech Center. But the PA BioTech Center is really managed and was created by the Hepatitis B Foundation, which my wife and I and Jana Paul Woody started. This is the Hepatitis B virus electron micrograph. And Baruch S. Blumberg Institute, named for Dr. Blumberg, who is Pennsylvania's Nobel laureate who discovered hepatitis B. So at the Blumberg Institute, we're primarily focused, our mission is to find a cure for people affected by hepatitis B and liver cancer. We're about 70 scientists here working. Most of us come from the universities, nonprofits, but a fair number from the pharmaceutical industries, and we're here to work on that. We continue to do that. That hasn't changed, and our labs have remained open. But we get it. I mean, this is a big problem. We're all affected by COVID-19. And several of our labs and several of our discoveries did seem to have some relevance to the treatment of COVID-19 or detection of SARS-CoV-2 is the name of the virus. And so we have redirected some of our work there. And I'll tell you very briefly about that. One, a drug that we had identified which had activity against a number of different so-called RNA viruses, Ebola among them, could be readapted or refitted for activity against SARS-CoV-2. We had sent out to the NIH, National Institutes of Health, for testing against SARS-CoV-1, which is very similar, and it showed activity, pretty good activity. So now we're working on with the NIH and the University of Pennsylvania. Professor Susan Weiss, one of the few places in the country that can do this, is testing our drug for SARS-CoV-2 activity. Another line of work being done here at the Blumberg Institute is from Professor John Culp. He's a computational chemist who, by the way, you've probably interviewed before because he leads the high school program.
I was reading about that. Excellent.
And he's putting our high school program. We used to have 29 high school kids here every day from Central Bucks schools. He's refitting that to be virtual, so some of the work will be done here by scientists here, and the kids can stay at home. But that's John Culp. He's a computational chemist. He computationally has scanned tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of drugs to see which would work against a protein, spike protein of SARS-CoV-2. He's found a couple, and he, working with a young person here, has identified a drug that seems to be active, and they are also going to be working with companies here to see if that can be promoted to something useful. And there's more that's going on. There are pockets of work going on here at the Blumberg. Finally, something we do here is kind of a public health activity. On one hand, we were lucky to have Dr. Sherry Cohn, who really runs the Hepatitis B Foundation. She has a doctorate in public health, and she's been helping keep this place compliant. See how far we're sitting apart from one another, a mask.
And we were
early on, we were early practitioners of good public health practices. But we're also working with universities and public health services around the state and around the world. I showed you an email I got today from the Pasteur Institute from a scientist there looking for help with one of his
in South
drugs.
Korea, I think.
He's actually the Pasteur Institute of South Korea, his colleagues in Paris, but that email came from South Korea. But yeah, I guess you saw that. And so we're going to help him test his drug. All we are doing there is some networking for him. The point is, people here are trying to pull their weight, stand up, and do something. So things are being done, interestingly, right in your backyard.
I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to mention some of the other activities we have going on at the center. So when the pandemic broke a couple of months ago, we stayed open as an essential business, and we've taken every measure, as Dr. Block said. I think we were a couple of weeks ahead of the mass and the social distancing to keep this place very safe. Well, the center's really taken on an all hands on deck approach. So we have several companies here in different spaces working on COVID-19. We have a company that has an antiviral platform, Everest, that's working on something towards the COVID. We also have a company here, Serologic, that is doing antibody tests for the county and for others. Along with a company here, we have Flowmetric, who's actually processing and doing the tests. We have another company, Quo Pharma, that actually has access to COVID-19 tests that has been in discussions with the county to help them. So we've had several discussions with the commissioners and other representatives of the Department of Health and how we can help out with this crisis. We have, as Dr. Block said, not only just the work getting done in laboratories from companies like Bloomberg, but we also have a company called Tiziano Life Sciences and Fox Chase Chemical Diversity Center that are also working on some COVID-related activity. So it is an all-hands-on-deck approach, and as Dr. Block said, in most people's backyard here in Central Bucks, they don't realize the effort that's going into this pandemic here at the center.
Could you just take one of the companies that you mentioned and sort of dig in a little bit more? I mean, I was reading about the peptides and how they're working to make that into potential autoimmune to develop antibodies against COVID.
Yeah, so I will pass that to Dr. Block.
Well,
scientist.
Just a little bit of the science for the
Sure,
business
absolutely.
community to understand some of that detail.
Well, what I know about what's being done here, and Lou also knows this, one of the companies here, Flowmetric, has developed or is implementing an antibody test.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
So they were one of the first places, as far as I know, certainly in the state, that had tests that could tell you whether or not you had an exposure, in principle, to the COVID-19. And that test is ongoing. That's done in cooperation with Serologics. There are, now for the peptide, I know what you're asking. That's Yazing. And you're right, that is a very, very novel idea. He is a Bloomberg adjunct faculty member funded by the Bloomberg Institute. But he had, like many of our faculty, has set up a company called Vigilon. And his idea, which is pretty clever, but it's being done elsewhere, is to take, he's making what are called mini bodies, so that you're right, they're like antibodies, not exactly, but they're designed to bind and attack the SARS-CoV-2 virus at its spike protein. So he's synthesized these in the laboratory and can show that they actually do block the virus from attacking cells in the laboratory. Now the question is to get that tested actually in more relevant systems. I think that's the strategy we're talking about. But the Everest technologies, I don't want to say more conventional, but they have a very, very clever broad spectrum antiviral which seems to work against multiple. And this is what you really want. You don't want to just develop a drug for the problem we have now, because also if you get too sharp a dagger, too precise, you'll miss the things, and even the mutants may come out. So the Everest technology tries to broaden it and make a drug that can work against multiple coronaviruses and actually multiple pandemic possible viruses.
Do you think this virus is mutating already?
So that's a controversy. So there's no question that this virus mutates. It's an RNA virus. It mutates. What seems to be true so far is the mutations aren't as rapid or abundant as I would have thought, knowing the kind of virus it is. So it's a somewhat stable virus for what's called an RNA virus that grows in the cytoplasm. I mean, it's pretty stable for some reason. But some of the mutations are being attributed to increased virulence. there's a mutation within the glycoproteins of the virus, and there's a paper out that attributes some of the more virulent strains to that. We know that the strain in New York is different than Seattle, Italy, and China. So there does seem to be some consequential mutation. But the good news is that the antibody reactions that have been tested seem to be broad enough to detect, I believe, all the strains or mutants that have been pitched at it. But don't think that the virus doesn't mutate. It does mutate. The question is, will those mutations be consequential? Eventually they will be. I mean, hopefully we'll be able to get a vaccine and whack this thing down. But the virus will go into hiding, and a virus like this will pop up again, and we've got to be prepared. Remember, this is SARS-CoV-2, meaning there's a SARS-CoV-1. And so it's part of a kind of the same zoonotic kind of family that can pop from animals to people. And just like flu does it too. Pops from animals to people, and that causes tremendous problems.
How about that? Do you think we will have a vaccine by the end of the year? I had to ask you.
I do.
Have to ask.
I don't think there's any question about it. There are vaccines. The one from Pitt is coming out. The one from David Weiner at Wistar and Penn. The one from, I don't remember the one from Oxford, and the one from Moderna. These are vaccines. They do exist. They are eliciting immune responses in people in whom it's given. The immune responses seem to be the kind that you want. What we will not know, most likely by fall or by December, is if they are really protective.
That's what
but we will.
ask.
But there are vaccines. There are vaccines, no question about it. They're being tested in people now. It's moving, I'm sure, as everyone knows, at warp speed, at a rate that. And it needs to, and I'm pleased that all the regulatory agencies and universities and companies are stepping up and being as flexible as possible. So we're going to have testing, but to know whether a vaccine really works or not, in other words, is really protective. I'm not an expert in that area or much of a student, but like I think you know as well as I do, that's going to take a fair amount of time. We're probably have to go on an educated guess. We're not going to wait. So going back to the hepatitis B vaccine, that takes thousands of people and several years to determine if, when you begin to vaccinate thousands of people, how do you know if they've been protected from your vaccine? You have to wait for people to become infected. You can't. So that's going to take a long time.
What a challenge.
So we're going to have to make judgments, smart assessments involving smart models that say, oh, this vaccine's eliciting protective immunity based on laboratory tests, and make a guess. And that's where we're going to be. But I tend to be an optimist in the middle of it.
I think the three of us are,
Yeah.
which is why we're here. Yes. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with our business community while we have a chance?
Well, if anyone's interested, I mean, at the heart of this biotech center, which is very unique, are our three nonprofits: the Hepatitis B Foundation, the Blumberg Institute, and the Pennsylvania BioTechnology Center. In some ways, we're all the same. We have similar management. But if anyone in the community is interested in helping out in any of our causes, but with the COVID research, they can go to the Blumberg Institute website or the Pennsylvania BioTechnology website. There's donation buttons there.
And I would add something else. We are a center of learning. So obviously we have graduate programs in science here. We do that through Geisinger Medical School. We do it through Penn. We do it through Drexel. And we're going to continue to do that online. I think this time next year we're all going to be sitting closer to each other, and we'll be back to normal. But in the meantime, we also have a high school program here that everyone should know about, and that's really neat. It's for the community. And obviously that's been suspended at this period of time. And I really have to give a call out, as I did to our academic director, John Culp, and his young people who are working with him here to put that together virtually. They're coming up with a really, I don't want to say ingenious, but really neat program where the students can join that program, stay at home, and they do some experiments at home. They're mock-up experiments at home that John's put together in kits. He sends it to them, and then they perform them here for real. We have a teaching lab in the other building. They actually do the experiments, they do the mock there, and then they look at the results the next day. I mean, I think it's really
Wow.
neat. It's a way to keep people engaged.
Yes.
And we're all learning, I'm learning about what can be done virtually or remotely with people working together at a distance, so that we don't lose the momentum that we had here. And I want to say that goes for all the other work being done here too. Everyone is finding ways to get it done. The workload here has not decreased. The people continue to come in. You'll see when you leave. I mean, we're staggering, but people are coming in. It's more like 16 hours a day than 8 hours a day. So the work continues to go on. So.
And if anyone's interested in that program, either helping contribute to it or if they want to sign up for it, all that information is on our website, Pennsylvania
Yeah, we are a
BioTech Center.
nonprofit.
Yeah.
Nonprofit.
Have to keep stressing
Yeah,
that. So.
yeah.
Or
Well, our
feel free
business-
to call the chamber. We'll be happy to
Yeah, thank
refer
you.
you. Thank you so much for today. To me,
Thank
it's
you.
very inspiring. Every time I come over here, the laboratories that you have, I wish I could get in one and perform some of those experiments. I think it's such a wonderful thing you're doing here for hepatitis B, for cancer in general, and for what you're doing for COVID right now. And for the work you've done in the past, touching on Ebola and some of the other things that we talked about earlier. I want to thank Thomas Brunt for donating his time to do the wonderful job he's been doing in photographing these chamber chats. We'll be back at you on the street next
And
week.
Dr. Garvin, before you
Yes.
cut off, I want to say something too. So I want to thank you, Dr. Garvin, for what
Oh,
you've
thank you.
done, for hanging in there through in good times and bad times.
Thank
You've gone through recessions, now you've gone through pandemics, and keeping us connected in the business community here and extending it to a nonprofit kind of business community. You've done a really fantastic
Thank you
job.
for that. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
See you.